Good morning and welcome to Liberty. I appreciate you coming out today for Sunday school. And we have a guest speaker today, Dr. Bobby Sparks, and he'll be speaking to us this morning on the Tribulation Temple. And in the morning session today, he'll have a follow-up message on the Millennial Temple. And so he's going to come this morning and share with us his message. So Brother Bobby, come ahead.
Thank you, Brother Kevin. Hey, thank y'all for giving me this chance. I like to preach, and since I'm semi-retired, I don't preach as much as I used to, but I do have several occasions. And coming to Liberty is one of my treats, because I have a vested interest in Liberty from the time y'all got started. Amen. And Liberty is a very special church in my heart. And Brother Kevin and his family has a special place in my heart. I almost feel like I'm just part of their family, just another of the family members. So they're very special. Thank you for letting me come. And there's a great interest in Israel right now. I got it in a hurry and slipped off without it, but I have a little patch that is fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And it's about 3 inches long, a couple of inches high. And it's a patch that goes on the uniform of an IDF soldier. And the patch is a dark green, and it has the image of a temple on it, and above the temple the word Messiah, because they believe that the Messiah is about to return. And they're looking for the Messiah. But unfortunately, what they're looking for in a Messiah is different than what we're going to be looking for. But nonetheless, the Bible prophesies that the Messiah is about to come back. And this study today will just give you an indication of how close we may be, because I think we're closer than most people realize and most Christians are aware of. So the first lesson that we're going to have, the Tribulation Temple, is to bring us up to date on what's going on in the world, and to show you that the Lord may come back very soon. All right. I'm going to be looking here at the screen much like as you do. Okay. One of the promises that God made in the last days, that God would restore Israel to her homeland, that the Jews would come back. Now listen, and this itself is a miracle, because how could you ever have a people that's scattered throughout the world, all over the world, maintain their identity, and then come back 2,000 years later as a national people? Because when people get scattered like that, they assimilate into the nations, and that's the end of it. But Israel's come back as a clear nation, and God said that in the last days He would bring them back. Jeremiah 31 verse 8, "Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and gather them from the coast of the earth, and with them the blind, and the lame, the woman with child, and he that travaileth with child. Together a great company shall return thither." And the next verse is Ezekiel 34:13, "And I will bring them out from the people, and gather them from the countries, and will bring them to their own land." Israel has come back into their homeland. Now, I remember, and by the way, I guess I'm glad I was born back then, but I was born in the year or year and a half before Israel became a nation in 1948. That's what I just told you, didn't I? I was born in 1946 in December the 8th, in case you want to remember that date. But in 1948, Israel was given a portion of that land. It was divided up by the United Nations. The land was under the Ottoman Empire, and the British allies made a promise to the inhabitants of that part of the world that if you'll side with us, we will grant you freedom to this land. We'll take you out from under the Ottoman Empire. Well, when it came time and the war came along, the Jewish men that lived in the land signed up and joined the British military. They were pilots, they were soldiers, some of the heroes of World War I. And then after the war was over with, the United Nations made two states out of it because Israel, the Jews, fought with them and helped them win the war. And because of that, and then World War II come along, and then because of the Holocaust, then they determined that the Jews were entitled to a portion of that land all to themselves, so it was divided up into a two-state agreement. Israel signed their agreement, accepted the two-state agreement, but the Muslim world refused to, because they refused to concede any inch of land over to the Jews. And so there's where we've been all this time. When, by international law, when the Arabs refused to sign the agreement, then the whole place became the property of Israel. But Israel didn't claim it. They were going to stick with their two-state solution. And then, so after 1948, in 1948, the British had stayed in there to maintain peace. And there were so many problems. Finally, the British said, we're tired of this. We're going home. And so when they left, Israel declared themselves a statehood, a nation, and war broke out immediately. Well, they won the war. And then, so everybody says, this is it. This is it. Israel is back in their land. Now the Lord's fixing to come back just at any moment. But that didn't happen, did it? Then in 1967, and I was in seminary then, and I remember the 6-Day War. It came along, and Israel broadened the amount of land that they had control over, and they took over the city of Jerusalem. And then everybody in all the prophecy books come along and said, well, this is it. This is it. Now Israel has gotten back into the city of Jerusalem. It's all fixing to happen. Well, it didn't. There's a clue to all of this that we have missed. And that is when God brings Israel back into their land, the immigration in Israel, the word is aliyah. And sometimes you'll hear that word used actually on the news, Jewish aliyah. Y'all ever heard that? Aliyah is the Hebrew immigration. Okay, so then the Jews after 1967 started coming back to the land, and then they've coasted along there all these years, and they got complacent. They're happy where they were. They were in different parts of the world, and they quit going back. So then when Russia invaded Ukraine, they had the biggest influx of aliyah in 20 years. Right after that, the Jews that were in Ukraine, the Jews that were in Russia, started going back to the land of Israel in great numbers. Now, the one thing about the Jews going back into their land, and Israel welcomes them, they encourage them, come back to your homeland. Well, they come back as engineers, doctors, scientists, skilled, trained people, and they bring technology back with them when they come back in the land of Israel. So they're certainly welcome. They don't cost the country anything. They bless the country in their returning back to their homeland. And so after that Russia-Ukraine, do you ever think maybe God did that? Stir them up, get his people back home? You know, when I realize some world politics, God is in control and he's doing this, I have a whole lot different attitude about it. So then, after October the 7th, 2023, and that tragedy hit Israel, did you know in the year following that is one of the biggest years of immigration, aliyah, back to Israel? You would think they would avoid that place. No, they're going back faster. So then, world politics and the things going on in Israel is all designed for God to bring his people back. There's a little over 7 million Jews back in the land. There's approximately 14 million in the world, so there's just slightly over half of the Jews in the world have gone back to the land. Now, I don't know what God's magic number is. How many people come back before he said, okay, that's enough? And the end time events begin. So the thing we're looking for, to me, is Aliyah and that immigration back, and God is getting things ready for the end time. So whenever that number in God's mind that I don't know is filled, that's when the last days begin to happen. Are we close to those last days? I think we are. Well, what we're going to have, and this pointer doesn't work on a TV screen, we're going to have in the future a peace treaty. Now, not just any peace treaty, and don't get excited when you hear about a peace treaty over there. This peace treaty will be the biggest deal that we've ever heard about from Israel. It'll be made for 7 years. I don't know what the world has in mind for picking the 7 years. I know what God has in mind. But it'll be a 7-year peace treaty between an entity called the Antichrist, who is endorsed by a League of 10 Nations. At that 10 toes on that Daniel's vision of that statue. And it has 10 toes with iron and clay, and that's the 10 nations of the last days that will form an alliance. I wished I had kept the headlines in the article that appeared. A lot of stuff comes through the internet, and you click and it's gone, and you can't find it again. But a Russian top general said that we'll never have peace in the Middle East until we form a League of Nations to take control. I thought, you nailed it. You nailed it. You know what you're talking about. So eventually there will be this League of Nations. I think there may be some European, but there will be Arab nations in this League of 10 nations. Form that treaty with Israel to assure them peace. And so that will be for a 7-year period. So during the first part of that tribulation, the world will have peace. And Israel will be allowed to rebuild their temple on Temple Mount. So during the first half of the tribulation, a temple will be rebuilt on the Temple Mount for the Jews to worship in that. Now, halfway through, you see the 7-year tribulation is divided into 2 halves, 3.5 years each. Now, whenever the Antichrist and these League of Nations make a peace treaty, there's going to be, the treaty is going to be open for the public. We know what it is, but I think there's going to be some backroom negotiations that never comes out public. I think they're trying to set Israel up so that they could actually destroy and take over the country. And so halfway through that peace treaty, the Antichrist invades Israel and drives Israel toward the south into what we call the Negev wilderness. They have actually a contingency plan that they could live down in that Negev wilderness, desert. They have in storage warehouses. They have enough tents. They got enough food. They got plenty of water for the Israelites to live down there for quite a length of time if they are driven out some part of their country up into the north. The Antichrist will not take over Israel entirely. He will drive them about halfway out of their land, and that's as far as he's going to be able to go. I don't know what's going to stop it. I don't know what the deal is, but he won't go all the way. God said that when he brings Israel back to their land, it's a permanent agreement. Israel will not be driven off their land again until the end of the world. And so you can just mark that one down. So about halfway into that tribulation, the Antichrist is going to invade Israel and take over part of the world. All right. Now, 2 Thessalonians 2:3 said, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." Next verse. says, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worship, so that he, as God, sitteth in the, what? Temple. That'll be the temple built in the first 3.5 years. The temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So he'll take over Jerusalem and the temple area, and then he'll set his headquarters up in the temple and claim that he's God. All right? Revelation 11:1. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein. You see, the scripture tells us there will be a temple built. And no doubt it's going to be built in the first half of the tribulation period. All right, now here's something I want you to tuck away in your brain. But the court, which is without the temple, leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles in the holy city, shall they tread under foot 40 and 2 months. 40 and 2 months is 3.5 years. Okay? So that's in the second half of the tribulation period there, when he takes over. Now, the people that are primarily in charge of building a new temple in Jerusalem is a group called the Temple Institute. There are other groups, kind of like Baptist in America. You know, you got this Jewish Reform, you got the Orthodox, you got the Conservative, kind of like Baptist, okay? And different groups are independent of each other, and they've all tried to vie to be the first and number one to be in charge of the next temple in Jerusalem. But the Temple Institute has gone so far out ahead of the others that the others decided they're going to have to cooperate with them. And the Temple Institute's sole purpose is getting ready to build another temple in Jerusalem, and to be on board to build, to get that temple built. Now, the former director of the Temple Institute is the Rabbi Cham Richmond. Now, he's retired from being the first director, but he's still one of the chief rabbis over everything. And he lectured up in northwest Arkansas one time, and Dottie and I, and I'm sorry she couldn't be here today, she just wasn't feeling up to it. She will never feel real healthy again. She's got those chemo treatments for 5 consecutive days, every 5 weeks, scheduled for the rest of her life. And so they just take it out of her, and so we just deal with it, her treatments. But anyway, she and I went up there to that conference, and Dr. Cham Richmond was the speaker for it, he and his son. And so one of the questions that he had to be asked, another person asked him, if you know where the Ark of the Covenant is, and he says, we do. And he said, but it's in secure location, but we know where it is. Now, he didn't say anything to the group as a whole. I know what he was talking about. And another question that I asked him was, if you were given the green light today to build a new temple on Temple Mount, how long would it take you to build it? His answer was somewhere between 18 and 24 months. Everything's ready. And I'll show you some of the stuff that's ready. Some of the building material is in prefabricated in storage. The furniture's all built. There is a tent school down in the desert. They don't let us gringos, Gentiles, go down there because we're unclean and we'll mess it up. But they have a mock temple down there where they are raising Levite men, and they're practicing the sacrifices and studying the holy days so that they're ready to take over the temple whenever they build it and it's open for business. So they got all that arranged down there in the wilderness. So anyway, he said it would take 18 to 24 months if they're given the green light today. Well, that sure makes it easy, that 3.5 years, doesn't it? So it would be easy for them to get that built in that 3.5 year period. And right here, outside in an open air area in a bulletproof glass cage, is the golden menorah that has been built for the next temple in Jerusalem. I remember when they were raising money for that, and they needed $4.5 million just for that one piece of furniture. And it is made of brass and overlaid in gold, and that will sit in that millennial temple. The tribulation temple, the next temple. That is made for the temple. It's not a duplicate or a replica. It's the menorah to go into the next temple in Jerusalem. And right here, and I had to beg hard to get that picture, because inside that Temple Institute there are signs everywhere, no photography allowed, period. And so there was a guy in there, and I kind of was trying to make friendship with him, and I told him, this is one of my studies. I love this stuff. It's a passion on my part. And I said, I'm going to ask you, would you allow me to get a picture beside that high priest? And he stuttered around a little bit. He took the picture, by the way. And he stuttered around a little bit, and he said, only on one condition. He said, if you never publish it or put it on the internet. And so I got a book on the priesthood, and I wanted it in there, so I wrote them and asked them. And they told me, no, you cannot use that picture in anything that you do. But I did not ask them if I could show it at Liberty Missionary Baptist Church. And so they didn't tell me I couldn't. And so you get to see that picture. Now, right there, that mannequin you see is the garment for the high priest, the next high priest of Israel. That's his garment. It is not a replica or a look-alike. That is actually the garment that the high priest will wear. They're ready. They got this stuff ready. They got his garment ready. It's on display. Now, it's not easy to see in the right-hand side of the picture. There is a gold piece of furniture. That's the altar of incense made for the next temple in Jerusalem. And over on the left side, there's a few accessories. Right there in the middle with that red cloth, there's 3 crowns there that the high priest would wear, I guess depending on what his mood is that day. And they read holiness to the Lord in Hebrew, and that's his crowns that he would wear on his head when he is functioning as the high priest. Okay, those are ready. Right there are these brick. Now, these brick were made for the next temple. They brought part of them in for display, and so you can see the brick for the next altar in Jerusalem. And they got a picture of that guy there supposedly lighting the wood. And so this is where they'll sacrifice the animals in the courtyard. And so they have the rest of the brick made and in storage, ready to install just as soon as they get the word that they can rebuild the temple on Temple Mount. Here's just some of the accessories. They're on the bottom right are called shofars. That's ram's horns. They're pretty fancy, decorated with some gold and silver, and that's the trumpets that they'll use at the temple. Right here is called the table of showbread. It's made and on display. And so everything's ready for it. Now, where will they build that next temple? That's the big question that everybody wants to know. Where on the temple will they build that next temple? Now, here's what I want to go back to, because I think this is very significant. He said, but the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. Now, keep that one in your brain. The court of the temple is not to be disturbed, because it's given to the Gentiles, and the holy city which they shall tread under for 42 months. So that's the last half of the tribulation period. Okay. Now, if you're looking at the picture, can you see that octagon-shaped red thing there in the middle, in that yellow section, that red-shaped octagon? That's the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is that Muslim building that supposedly, and he never was there. I don't know why they keep telling this story, he never was there. That's where Mohammed rode the horse into heaven and came back. Oh, thank you. Came back, and so that's a special holy place. Now, when they built that thing many years ago, the other Arab nations were in revolt and angry at them because they accused the Arabs in Palestine of trying to move the headquarters of Muslims from Mecca to Jerusalem. And so they kind of left things well enough alone. If you went there in 1967, it was a quite ugly building, nothing nice about it at all. And then after 1967 and the Jews took over that area, suddenly that thing became a holy site, and they put the gold on top of the dome and cleaned it up and polished it up because they were trying to argue this is one of our holiest sites, and you're letting piles of trash be in it. So they had to get their act together and say that it's a holy site. Now, what's unusual about that dome of the rock, the building is octagon-shaped, and Muslims never build an octagon-shaped building. You see, over that site, there's a big rock there, and the Catholics built a church there. In the 3rd, 4th century, they built a church on the site. It was destroyed by the Muslims. The Muslims come along and then build this building on top of the ruins of that church. And so if you mention that to them, they'll get highly offended. And what the deal is that some of the rubble left over from the destruction of Jerusalem and columns of AD 70, they're in there. Did y'all, you got to go, did we get to go in it when you were there? Now it's totally off limits to Gentiles. We'll never get to see the inside of it again. I'd like to make at least one more trip because I got more questions to ask. Did you get to go in it? All right. Well, y'all are privileged folk because you can't go in there any longer. Okay. So that if you ask Jewish rabbis, where is the temple going to be built? Where does it need to be built? Well, it needs to be built right there where that dome is. What are you going to do about that dome? Well, God will take care of that dome. Maybe an earthquake will come and remove that dome. Your talk about that dome and the temple being built where that dome is. Of all the scholars, about 75% will say that the temple will go where the dome is. About 20% will say it goes north of there. That dome is not sitting on the side of the temple, that the temple sat north of there. And then about 5%, they got it everywhere, all over that town. And so we kind of discredit that. But anyway, some say it goes where the dome is, some say it goes north. Now I want to show you some things about that. And along with where the temple is going to go, where is the Ark of the Covenant? Because it brings that question up at the same time in our discussion. Where is the Ark of the Covenant? Well, the theories about that Ark of the Covenant, that it was there in the Qumran area, in one of those caves, just hadn't found it yet. Some say it was on Mount Nebo, where Moses was taken up. Some say it was down at Mount Sinai, where they were in the wilderness. Some say that it was taken by Bathsheba's son and taken down to Ethiopia. And if you see the documentaries of that church in Ethiopia, they make a good documentary. It could be convincing if you didn't know. And they got this church down there, and they say that way back there that it was taken during Solomon's time, and it was taken down to Ethiopia, and now it's in one of those churches. And so that church is under guard 24 hours a day. The priest that stays at that church never, ever steps foot outside the doors. He will stay there till he dies. And so they say they have that ark in there. Well, they have replicas of that ark in every church of that kind, that Orthodox church, kind of a offspin of Catholicism. And every one of those churches have an Ark of the Covenant in it. And there's supposed to be a duplicate of the one in this church. Well, all these other churches have one, and the Ark that they have looks nothing like the one described in the Bible. No, they don't even look alike. And it's just a little square box of stone. And so I don't give that any credit whatsoever, okay? If it was for real and it was down there, those Jewish groups have been in there and gotten it out, and it would have been long gone. One of the plausible things that has come up is Pharaoh Shishak of Egypt invaded Israel, and they claim that he took it back to Egypt. That's the story behind Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, that it was down in Egypt. But there's all kinds of theories. But the Jews in Israel, the Orthodox Jews, believe that the Ark of the Covenant is under that Temple Mount today. Now, over here on the left at the top is that eastern gate that's in the wall of Jerusalem. By the way, you know our Branson project I've talked about? We have groundbreaking set for June the 20th. Lord willing, we're going to get that thing done. We are to receive by around April $8.5 million from the city of Branson, and then when we get that done, the donors sign their contracts, and we're headed to get that project done. But see, right here's that eastern gate. The reason I mentioned that, the entrance to our building is going to be a duplicate of that eastern gate in the wall of Jerusalem. So you see that wall is all closed up. You see, those Arabs heard rumors that Jesus is going to come back, and they blocked that gate up so he can't get in. I don't know what's funny about that, but it's funny, isn't it? Okay. Now, along the, you're looking at the western wall right here. It used to be called the Wailing Wall. They just call it the Western Wall. Y'all know what the Western Wall is, don't you? That's where the Jews come and pray, and they put prayer. They write their prayers out on paper, and they stick them in the cracks of that wall. And so this is the Western Wall. A few years ago, Israel come over here, and they dug down to ground level. It's about 20 feet down there, ground level, from the floor of that Western Wall down to the ground level at the time of Christ, about 20 feet. See, when they destroyed that temple, they come along and took all those buildings and walls and columns and pushed them over to the side, and they just buried everything. That's about 20 feet deep in debris. It would cost them mega millions of dollars to excavate all that, and they're not that interested in doing it, so it's there, but it's just covered over. So they went down, and they went along that western wall all the way down and they come out in Arab quarters over here. Well, there's a tunnel that goes down through there, and down through there, you get down there to a certain point, there is a gate that's been ancient days closed up. We don't know why, but it was closed up before the AD 70 destruction. It had been closed up a long time. They closed that gate up. And so the picture on the right is that gate. It's hard to see, but if you can look at the top of the picture, that gate down here in the wall is exactly the same look as the eastern gate on the other side. They're just alike, and that gate there. Well, in 1995, Brother George, and there was 6 of us, it was the day Mr. Rabin's funeral. We had an option of going to the street where the funeral and the dignitaries from all over the world were going to come for that funeral, or we could go down in that tunnel. And we chose to go down in the tunnel and see this. Well, down in that tunnel, back up here, on the top right-hand side, there's a small stone. That looks like all the other stones now, and you can't tell the difference in it. But Brother George and I know, because we got in there and we saw that hole where there was a stone had been removed by Rabbi Getz. And so he had crawled under there, the Temple Mount, and claimed that he found the Ark of the Covenant and some other furniture from the temple. and it's all down there. And so the Arabs, with listening devices, heard that he was down there and got him out, and they sealed that hole up with concrete, and when we saw it, it was green concrete. Now it's disguised so that nobody asks any questions. Why is that concrete in that hole there? So that you don't ask questions, and if you ask the guide today, they don't know anything about it. But Rabbi Cham Richmond, I asked him, I said, that Rabbi Getz went in that hole and found it, didn't he? He said, yeah, we just don't talk about it. And he went in that hole right there. So it may be. I have not seen it, okay? I'm not telling you it's there. I'm just telling you that the Orthodox Jew says it's there. So we just only can take their word for it. All right. Now there's something interesting about that Temple Mount. Up here at the top, and it's kind of hard to see at the back, there's above that red rectangular, there's a line drawn. Over on the right is the actual Eastern Gate, okay? So I have a friend over there. I asked him he pulls up some satellite images that I don't have access to. And I said, I want you to draw a perpendicular line through the center of that eastern wall, and let's see where it goes. So over here, just above that dome, there's a red dot, and it says the cupola of the spirits. And it's a outside cupola, and it's about 8 feet wide. And it is the only place on top of the mountain where the actual bald rock of the mountain can be seen. Everything's others covered over with pavement. But that one spot's still open. You can put your foot on it. You're on the actual Mount Moriah of ancient days. Well, that dome is there. Many, that 20% of those Jewish scholars say that's where the temple was, and that's where the Ark of the Covenant sat. And it's still visible today. And so they say that the Ark of the Covenant was there. So you remember that tunnel that was down here? Okay, you got the cupola up here, and then over there you got the Eastern Gate. And he drew that line right through the middle of that cupola and right through the middle of that gate underground that we're talking about. And a perfectly straight line. And if the temple sat up there in line with that Eastern Gate, that all comes together, matches very perfectly. So they actually may have access to the Temple Mount. Now, the question then is the temple to be built north of the Dome of the Rock? Well, it does say, doesn't it, not in the Bible, that the courtyard shall be given to the Gentiles, and they both can be there? So there's room to build the temple north of the Dome of the Rock, and they can build a wall where they can't look at each other and have a good peace treaty and covenant. Everybody's happy. Now that Dome of the Rock, the statement that it has to be moved to build the new temple can just be a negotiation ploy. They may know that it doesn't go there. But they're going to come along first and say, we're going to build that temple. That dome's got to go. That dome's got to. Well, the Arabs are going to get it in a frenzy, and they're going to have a fit. You can't tear it. Well, just let us build it on the north side then. Oh, that's okay. You can build it up there. You don't have to destroy the dome to do that. We'll let you do that. See, and then everybody's happy, right? We've come to an agreement. It's a win-win situation for everybody. So I think they pretty well know it's not going to go where that dome is located. Okay. Now, the Bible says, Luke 21:28, and when you see these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Luke 21:31, so likewise ye, when ye see these things come to pass, know ye that the kingdom of God is nigh at hand. In Matthew 24 and verse 40 it says, then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken and the other left. And Luke adds to it, he said, I tell you, in that night there shall be two men in one bed, the one shall be taken and the other left. Okay? In Matthew 25:13, watch therefore, for ye know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. Now, when it talks about two working, two at the mill, two in the bed, it doesn't mean it's a 50-50 thing. It just is using an illustration that when the trumpet sounds, there'll be two people together and one of them disappears and the other one's still left. Maybe a couple in bed, one of them's saved, one of them's not. The saved one disappears in a blink of an eye, they're gone. And so all over the world, when the Lord comes back and the trumpet sounds, then all of the saved are going to be just snatched out and gone and disappear. And hopefully you're not lost and riding on an airplane with two saved pilots. Okay? It could get a little scary in that situation. But anyway, one will be taken, one will be left. We don't know. The Lord didn't tell us the date or the hour. And if He did, we'd wait to the last minute. So He just said, you be ready. And when you see these things come to pass, look up. Your redemption draweth nigh. You don't have any time to waste. If you hadn't made that peace with God, you better get it done quick. Those things are happening, and they're happening fast. And the Lord may just come back, but we don't know when. You better be ready now. We got 4 minutes. Anybody got a real quick question? We're going to give you a little break before we come back and do the Millennial Temple. Any questions? All right. Well, Brother Kevin, when I was in high school, a teacher asked a class one day if anybody had any questions. It is silent. And the teacher kept asking, no question? And one student spoke up and said, well, I don't know enough to ask a question. Either I've answered all of them, or I've got you so confused you don't know what to ask. Okay? But if you have one later, let me know. All right, Brother Kevin.